So, a very warm welcome to our series of Life in Leadership, a podcast from Windsor Leadership. I'm Liz Ward, the Alumni Relations Manager, and over the coming months, I'll be joined by Dave Lewis, former Deputy Chief Constable for Dorset, Director of the Cricket Regulator, and Non-Executive Director of the Human Tissue Authority. Hi, Dave.
Hello, good to see you.
Dave is also a Windsor Leadership Programme Chair and Facilitator, and together we'll be in conversation with a series of high-profile leaders to explore their leadership insights. We are delighted to be joined today by Dame Katherine Grainger, Chair of UK Sport, and shortly due to be the first ever female chair of the British Olympic Association. Hello there, Katherine.
Lovely to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, Katherine, a very warm welcome. Please give us a flavour of who you are for those who may not know you.
Good question to start with. Yeah, so I was born and bred in Glasgow, and then I went through to Edinburgh to study law at university, and really did enjoy studying law, but as it turned out, seemed to enjoy more spending time in a boat. That's where I learned to row. When I graduated with my undergrad degree, I spent the next 20 years being part of the GB rowing team, and went across that time across 5 different Olympic Games. And then when I finally had to hang up my oars and admit that I couldn't be an athlete forever, which was a reluctant move, but inevitable on hindsight, then I moved into being the chair of UK Sport, and I've done that for the past 8 years.
Beautiful. You are massively modest. I mean, I've got the details here about the number of Olympic medals you've got. Do you want to just touch on that for people? Because, I mean, you've really undersold yourself there, big time.
To be fair, I didn't really intend to have a career in sport, and certainly not in rowing. It wasn't something I sort of grew up with. My career sort of coincided beautifully and unplanned with the creation of the National Lottery, which really has transformed a lot of things in our country. So there was funding brought into a lot of the Olympic and Paralympic sports, including rowing, and that probably meant I could have this sustained career and also sustained success. I was part of the crew they had the first ever women's Olympic medal back in Sydney in 2000, and then I medalled at consecutive games through to my final ones in 2016. And probably a personal highlight would have to be the 2012, the London Games, which was such a magical time for certain within Britain. And I won a gold medal there with Anna Watkins. So those were definitely highlights. I was studying throughout that time as well, trying to balance my life. Being a full-time athlete is pretty full time and intense, but for me it was important to keep learning and developing in other areas. So I did a master's and a PhD alongside the sporting types. So I kind of, I suppose I still never knew what I would do beyond sport, but I wanted to feel I had some options probably by the time I left.
Dave, over to you for the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think that's really interesting. But can I start with looking at your early career as a rower and just maybe elsewhere in your life as well, through education and so on, how important were leadership figures around you in shaping your perspective and helping you to achieve success?
I think, when you look back, and I guess it's, certain parts of your life, you can start really reflecting and seeing more. I had so many incredible characters around me all the time. And I think at the time, you don't necessarily see them as leadership figures, but, in hindsight, of course, that's what they were. And that goes from, teachers were a huge influence in my sort of early days. When I went to university and started to row there, the coaches in sport are effectively, your teachers. They motivate you and they guide you and they support you and they sort of see the potential in you and hopefully bring out the potential. And I had an incredible coach when I was still at university, so I was still sort of developing as an athlete. And again, looking back, I only sort of realised sort of after the fact just how ahead of the time he was. He was always very good at not just seeing you as an athlete, but seeing you as a person and what did you need in your life to balance you, to bring out your best. And yes, of course, it was about the hours on the water and the time in the gym and the technical and the tactical and all those important elements of being an athlete. But he also knew, my university study was important to me and I had to find time to do that. He knew that, my family and my social life and my friends were important to me. And if I was imbalanced for too long in any one direction, then I didn't see it myself initially. I just knew I was somehow unsettled or unhappy, and he could recognize that actually it was because something was wrong. So he was very, very good at just very astute at keeping an eye on all elements of what I suppose what made me the performer that I had to be, and gradually adjusting as we went along what was needed, much more than I recognised myself. And the other thing he was amazing at was he took influence and inspiration from everywhere. So he would read, you know, all different pages of the newspapers back in the days, like all the supplements, all the extra bits, and would just draw out inspiration from whether it's headlines in newspapers, or what's happening in the business world, or what's happening in the travel, or what's happening in obituaries, and all these things. He would just soak up knowledge and somehow find a way to transfer it into how he was coaching me. So that was almost the first influence of this. Just one, I guess, seeing the potential in people and how it's much more rounded than the obvious thing that they're just doing, but also to this constant desire to learn and to improve and to find sources of kind of inspiration. That was really like, without even, he never taught it to me in a way. I guess you just pick it up with these people around you. And then when I came into the national rowing team, it was time Steve Redgrave and Matthew Pinsent were still leading the charge, and being that close to people who were undoubtedly and almost untouchedly the best in the world was also, you just saw firsthand, this is what it takes. These are the standards that get set. This is what it takes to be the best. And, that's how they get there. And a lot of it was just, hard work and repeated effort. So again, I guess it was just those early years starting out, you just realize you're picking up constantly from the people around you of how you could be and how you could do it yourself.
And what did you take of that into leadership now?
I think pretty much everything I use now is in my chair role or in other roles I have probably stemmed from that incredible time being an athlete. Now, whether that's because it was obviously me developing as a person anyway, and it's just that crucial time in your life, or because of the experiences I had. Sport is something that will push you to your absolute limits and often beyond. And I was very much in a team sport, so you're always finding out how to motivate yourself, how to motivate others, how to collaborate, how to work together, how to tackle really tough disappointments and frustrations, how to overcome obstacles. It's a very sort of problem-solving mindset you need to have as an athlete. So you're constantly, yes, recognizing challenges, but always looking about how to overcome them, always finding a way around or through, and who you need to help you do that, always learning, always developing, always improving, always being curious about, how it could be better. I also think I got an amazing amount of joy most of the time. There were some years much harder than others, but when I was at my best, I was really loving what I did. And I think that sense of you can be doing something that feels hugely important and hugely stressful and pressurized, and yet you can find fun and a joy in the heart of it. And I definitely sort of kept that with me. So I think there's loads of things I learned that I wasn't, again, I think the lovely thing about sport as a teacher, you're not aware you're sitting in class learning lessons. You're just almost living and experiencing, and by that finding ways that work for you or finding ways to be. And equally, you see behaviors and ways of how you don't want to be. I think that's as crucial as you pick up ways that people deal with situations, and you think, well, if I was ever in that situation, I would maybe do it differently. I wouldn't want to be that. So the impression you leave on people, I think I spent a lot of time in a very high performing teams under immense sort of spotlight or pressure, and you naturally learn how you cope best in that, but also how you can help other people cope best in that. And so all those skills I still use constantly, I think.
It's that Maya Angelou thing, isn't it? That people will forget what you said and what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. I quite often quote that on Windsor programs. One of the other things that we find at Windsor is that sometimes sports leadership doesn't readily translatable to the audience in front of them. Have you got any thoughts about the way in which sports leadership translates into general leadership?
I personally find it translate quite easily, because ultimately you stand back from the specificity of what it is. I was about trying to work with people to go fast backwards over 2,000 meters wearing Lycra. Now, that's not for everyone in their day job. I totally reflect on that. But, you take away exactly that bit of it, and it is, it's an incredible amount around having a really clear ambition or a focus or that common sense of purpose that unites people in a team. It's about understanding people's roles within it. It's about constant feedback and analysing and seeing where the room for improvement. It's about tackling difficult conversations when things are wrong. You need to have an incredible sort of trusting, open relationship in any team to be able to have those difficult conversations in order to improve. It's about dealing with setbacks and disappointments and readjusting goals as and when needed. It's, all these things. You think, I could say that list of things probably in a lot of different walks of life, and people would be, thinking, yeah, that's what I do. That's what my job is. And at the end, the fact that I sat in a boat going backwards, that bit isn't relevant, but the rest of it is. And a lot of it, most people's roles in leadership will be about other people. And I think that was the one thing that I enjoyed probably most about my sport was, work across many, many, many years. I had such an array of incredible characters I worked with, and all with different strengths and vulnerabilities and challenges, and all of it is about, the main job is trying to get the best out of those people, for this common purpose. And actually, a lot of leadership is, yes, dealing with difficult situations and difficult decisions, but a lot of it is about people. And I think the more you understand yourself and the more you try to understand the people around you, the better chance you have of sort of succeeding in a lot of areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were at the absolute pinnacle of your career as an athlete. At what point did you make that decision to step into leadership?
Yeah, hand on heart, it was not a conscious decision. And I'm immensely glad that I did make the decision and I did go in that direction. But like I'm sure a lot of people, I speak to many, many people in many impressive, exciting roles, and a lot of people think, I don't know how I got here. This wasn't the plan. I didn't leave school, university, or whatever route you take through life and think this is where I'm going. And yet, very happy with where people have ended up. And I think for me, we hear a lot from athletes, especially people who've been in and around that world for a long time. It is very hard to leave. It's very disconcerting to step away from something that you are very clear in, who you are, what you bring, what you're doing, why you're doing it. Is an incredible structure, and a lot of reassurance comes from that structure and sense of place and belonging. And suddenly overnight it's gone. The whole thing shifts, and suddenly not just are you stepping away from it, but it's going to continue without you. That awful sense of, oh my goodness, they could do it without me now, and they will have to do it without me, and therefore, where do I belong and where do I go next? So, I did, even though I had been an athlete much longer than I had ever expected to, and I'd been very successful, and I stepped away, in the way I wanted to. I finished it when I wanted to and how I wanted to. So a lot of athletes don't get that privilege to do that. And yet I still struggled and I still found it hard, and I didn't really know where to turn next. And there's also a moment of, if you've been at the top level of something, it's very hard to think, do I really want to start right at the bottom of anything? But I want something that I'll be passionate about, that I'll enjoy, that I'll be challenged by, but I don't know in what form that will take. So I was, really kind of not sure about next steps, and that's hard when you've had quite a sort of clarity for so long. And actually I still remember I was on a train, and I got an email through my phone with someone saying, have you seen this job advert? It was a job advert for the chair of UK Sport, and UK Sport's an arm's length government body. It takes all the public money from the National Lottery and also the government and invests it into the Olympic and Paralympic sport in this country. So it's huge, and invests in a lot of the major sporting events coming to the UK, and it's got a lot of different areas it covers. And someone had said, oh, have you seen someone who's going to be, this is going to be a job coming up? And I thought, that's really interesting, and I wonder who's going to get it. And yes, I'm involved in sport, therefore it is quite interesting to know who will be taking on these roles. And then they replied saying, no, I was wondering if you would be interested in looking at it. And I thought, there's just no way. Like, I've just been an athlete. I have done that same thing for 20 years. And now leading an organization of such, responsibility and importance within sport is not something I was even vaguely considering. And I think I didn't know what the job would be. I didn't know what a chair did, if I'm honest. I didn't know what kind of, when talk about sports governance, I didn't know what that even meant.
So how did you get from that point of thinking, oh gosh, no way could I do this, to the point of actually applying? Was there somebody who came into the mix, or was there some sort of moment of revelation? You thought, yes, I can do this?
Well, the person who emailed me started by saying, have a look at the job description. So it was the first step. So it was a really basic step, very safe step. I'm literally on my phone. There's no one that knows I'm looking at this. It's absolutely fine. There's no embarrassment going to be caused by looking at this. And they had written the job description in such a way that it was very open. It wasn't, chair experience wasn't absolutely essential, which is good because I didn't have it. You didn't have to have been in a boardroom. It was, that would have been good to have, but a sort of experience, first, top level experience in high performance sport was sort of the crucial bit. And I was thinking, well, I have done that. So I went through the job description and thought, actually, arguably, I have actually ticked the boxes needed, but still, I get that, but I couldn't think of this. And I suppose what I moved to was I spoke to, we've got these incredible people that work within sports, our national governing bodies within Olympic and Paralympic sport. And they're sort of performance lifestyle advisors was their name at the time. And their main purpose is just support athletes in almost every element apart from the sport itself. So everything else around your life. What else do you need and want and help? And how can you develop as a person alongside your career? And how can this be, work hand in hand? So I went to my advisor and I said, look, she'd been trying for years to get me to write a CV. I just had never done it. So I said, look, I'm interested actually to write a CV because for the first time, there's a job that there's no way I'll get, but I'm interested to apply. And it was almost emotionally that will move me from being in a slight denial about having to get a new job to, if I've written a CV, I'm starting to convince myself I am now stepping forward. So we worked really well together because I also needed help to draw out, rather than just saying I've got nothing to write in a CV because I've done 20 years in a boat. And yes, that was successful, but that's all I've done. She was just incredible about, okay, by doing that, what have you done? What other, and it was almost, leadership lessons I'd learned through doing sport. And we put together a CV that I was quite proud of by the end. And then, so I felt more confident. I'll apply. I'll never get further, but I'll apply. And this is, now I'm looking for jobs. This is me now actively searching for a new role. And that's, I need that. I need to accept that now. And then they surprised me by saying, we'd like to invite you to interview. So then I thought, well, okay, well, now I get to practice interviews. This is good. I've never done interviews. So again, I worked with my advisor. Can we just practice interviews? And she was great. And she got a couple of other people involved. Let's do mock interviews. And I actually really enjoyed the prep for it. I really studied for it. I really practiced for it. I was ready. I was almost seeing it as, this is another race I'm entering and this is a new competition I'm going to try. So I did the interview and again thought, there's no way I'll get this job. I've got nothing to lose. I'll just really enjoy it. So I did it. And then left that thinking, oh, what a shame I'll never do that job. Because actually having, done all the work for it, that'll be an incredible job to do. That really will be. And then a few days later, I got a call from the Minister for Sport saying, we'd like to offer it to you. And at that point, I went into slight panic because it never really felt real until that moment. And then it was like, oh, wow, now it's a genuine grown up moment of, do I actually want to do this job? And because all that it will bring and all that it will slightly take over my life in other ways, and it's huge. And I had been slightly, enjoying the theoretical idea up till now, and now it was very real. And then I had to make the decision. And even then it wasn't obvious, but I have obviously said yes and didn't regret it for one moment of the past 8 years.
That's a fabulous, fabulous story. Thank you so much. And utter modesty with it as well. And that sort of, me,
true.
really? I could do it?
Yeah, absolutely me, really. Yeah, I do. I mean, I honestly spent my whole time at UK Sport just thinking, I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky to be in this role. It's a very rare, unique, special role that I work with. I think the hardest thing for me was how on earth will I replace that time I was an athlete in that sort of very high performing, purpose driven, exciting, challenging world. And what I found is you never replace it in the same way. It's almost, it's pretty much impossible. But I found something that kind of matched it in. It still had a huge sense of purpose. My role with UK Sport. It's got this incredible drive behind it. It's got a very kind of current relevancy. It works with extraordinarily impressive people, both at my board and executive and across the organisation level. You work in great partnership across the wider sector. It's constantly changing and challenging, and you're having to adapt and improve and learn. And I kind of, I think about a year in, I thought this is better than I ever could have dreamt because it almost fulfills everything I loved as an athlete. I don't get a medal sadly, but almost everything else. It's the same sort of feeling of challenge and and testing myself and collaboration and inspiration and all those good stuff.
It's really interesting listening to you talk about that, and to talk about almost that sense of imposter syndrome, something that we explore so often on programs. I'm interested to hear what you, on reflection, thought about how you developed your leadership style before you got into this leadership role. So we've talked about some of the coaches and the people that have inspired you, the things that you've learned. I guess that some of this is intuitive, but now that you've had time to reflect on it, what do you think about what you learned and how you were starting to become a leader and form your leadership skills, even when you were in the boat, when you were in the sport, before you then took on these more senior roles?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think I was forming those while I was in a boat, again without consciously being aware that's what I was developing. So I think over my very long time in a boat, each seat within a rowing boat has sort of different responsibilities, and with that comes a huge accountability because almost you have your own seat and it's your role to make sure you are doing that as best you possibly can. So I guess I think I learned a lot of accountability and responsibility, and I think that's just being a team player. You sort of have that
Yeah.
in spades. I think I learned how important it is to be able to articulate not just the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, but why we're trying to achieve it, and how people's motivations could be very different of their why they're trying to achieve what we're doing. But and that's great and that's fine. It really helps people knowing why they care about what they do, but it's important they do care and they are bought into the sort of vision that we're all trying to drive towards. I think this curiosity, this idea of constantly learning, was always there when I was in sport. There's always feeling of um, in a wonderful sort of urgency of needing to improve, needing to be better, and never therefore assuming we always had the answers or we or what had worked before will go again. And I think that's really kind of helped as you step into other roles. There's a real sense of compassion. You not just for the people around you, but for yourself as well. I think that there will be times where you don't achieve all that you want to, or things happen or go wrong, or things out of your control. And a sort of level of understanding and compassion was crucial to, you still could have absolutely cutting edge people focused on performance and outcomes and measures, but that doesn't mean it can't still be compassionate and secure. And I think, I also was an incredible ability to sort of be able to analyze and review things. You know, once you've laid out what you need to achieve and how you want to achieve it and things, then actually to make sure that you are holding yourself to account, to review that repeatedly and often and adjust as much as you need to. So I think, I mean, all these things that when you're an athlete, it's just slightly taken for granted. It's just part and parcel. Otherwise, you don't succeed. You don't stay in the sport because it moves fast and people move fast around you, and there will always be frustratingly younger, better people kind of chasing your tail. So, it forces you to keep ahead of the game. So then you play to, even over time, also how you have to be conscious of how you have changed or changing or what new skills you've acquired and where some things might be, some things start to weaken in some areas, but actually that you get other strengths in other areas. So I think the self-awareness is huge as well. And
Mm.
and you were forced to have an incredible honesty about it. There was no hiding. There was no pretending. You were found out very quickly, if not by yourself or your teammates or your coach. You were exposed. So there was also an ability to have just those really, really hard feedback discussions. We had to be openly critical of ourselves and each other in a way that can feel very vulnerable. Once you know you're doing it to achieve something else that's important to you all, then it feels like you can have the harder conversations.
And one of the things I really like about the way you've sort of laid things out, Catherine, is clearly there's lots of self-reflection there. I think that's a real hallmark of the best leaders. And so you've talked about the assets that you sort of brought into your leadership from sport and from your career in sport. But I'm wondering what challenges you experienced as well. What were the difficult things? What were the gaps? And if you had your time again, was there anything you would do differently?
I do think one of the things that helped when I stepped in, so I was very conscious I had sort of lived experience in sport that not everyone would have. but they would have other things. So I was very, very open from the very beginning. I didn't pretend otherwise. I do not have boardroom experience. I do not have chairing experience. So
Yeah.
I have huge gaps. And I remember even at the interview, I think, saying if you're looking for, if the most important thing to you is an experienced chair, I won't be right for you. And that, I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. But one thing I do have is a willingness and an ability to learn. And that's what I've done every day as an athlete. And I believe there was a very, very good executive team, a very strong board. And yes, it might be unusual as the chair coming in, but I'd be a chair who's just going to have to learn from everyone around me and learn fast. So I was probably very conscious of the gaps I had, and the challenges ahead. But I think because I was quite open about them from the start, I wasn't nervous about being found out, or I wasn't nervous about, getting it wrong. So I think being able to admit to board members or my own chief exec that, I won't necessarily be the mentoring role that normally the chair is, or the my chief exec might have had in the past, because I'll be the one almost learning more. And I had a really open discussion about that and how different that would feel, and if that's going to be awkward or not. So I think, yeah, I think there was a very early admission from me in the gaps, and then therefore I could probably be more, true to myself and not trying to pretend to be any otherwise. But there's still an element of when I went into that boardroom for the first time, you are still chair of the board, and there is an expectation that comes with that, and there's certainly a huge respect to the role, if not the person. The role certainly gets, in title alone, gets the respect. And so I suppose there was still part of me not playing the role, but conscious, even if internally I was still thinking, oh my goodness, I don't see myself as the chair of board in the same way as I might have seen on TV or read about in books or anything else. So I still have to have behaviours that are expected in this role. And I don't see that as a pretense. I think that was just also me giving due respect to there's the only one way this can work, and it still will be that people still respect the role of the chair of the board, even if it's someone who's never done it for a day before in their life. So there was bits of definitely learning on the job, and I think if I did it, I don't think I'd do huge amounts differently. What I wish I had done is, and I've sort of said, as an athlete, you are so good at reviewing constantly. We reviewed every day, every week, every month, every time we competed. Everything was constantly reviewed, and we could do really quick reviews and turn things around. And I think what happened to me was I got given one of those, what you do as a leader in your first, I can't remember, it was 100 days, 180 days, whatever, the books you get. And I was like, right. And before I started it, because I had about a month before I started, after being named, before I officially began. And I remember reading the book and I've got it still somewhere. It's got massive post-it notes in it, and I've got scribbling. But it gets to about 2/3 through the book, and then it stops dead, because by then I was in the role and I had sort of prepped a bit. But then you're in the role, and what you find, and this is a sort of part-time role, but it runs at such a pace, and you can get so lost so quickly into the day-to-day doing, that I never finished that book. I still haven't finished that book. That's the one thing I'm slightly annoyed at myself, is that I knew better than that, and I know how, and even now I know how important stopping and reviewing, whether it's a day or a week or a month, like I say, just regular reviewing is so important and so crucial, whether it's your own performance or the board's performance or your team's performance or whatever it is. That review process is so helpful and so critical, and yet even now I don't do it enough, because I get lost in how busy I can be doing. And actually I think, especially in these leadership roles, the most important and responsible moments is when you stop doing and reflect or plan or think or check in. And that's something I wish I'd done more of earlier. And also I wish I'd kept a better diary, because I go through phases of I love writing and I love taking notes of things, but again, you get busy and you think, oh, the last thing I want to do after a busy day is sit and write down my thoughts or reflections. And I think there are such golden nuggets that I will have missed now, because of they just get lost in time, don't they? With all good intentions, you run out of them. So I think probably taking time for myself and for others and reviewing and taking note. I wish I would go back and do it again. I'd do that, because I think there's probably more value to be had. And also that thing that's said, isn't it? Everyone is quoted as saying it at some point. I don't know who originally said it, but that thing of And we do overestimate what we do in a day, but underestimate what we do in a year or a decade or a lifetime, whatever. Take your pick. But the long term, we sort of underestimate what we can achieve, but the very short term, we overestimate. So I make all these lists of what I'm going to do every day and never get through them. But actually, over time, you can achieve masses. So
Yes.
a bit of that.
Yeah, those masses actually it's really important to stop and look back at what you've achieved over time, isn't it? Because otherwise you come at the end of the day with that to-do list that you haven't completed, and it's another day of things you haven't done. So reflection piece is classic Windsor, isn't it? It's very much what Windsor leadership is about. It's actually taking time to reflect on one's leadership. So,
and I think when
excellent.
we do it, it's so important, and you really enjoy it. And sometimes it frustrates me. Why haven't I taken time to do that? Why haven't I prioritized that? Because I know when I do it, it's great. And I sometimes don't prioritize it. Still learning.
Maybe in sharing it here, you can encourage somebody else, another leader, to actually open the book and start writing.
And myself. I need to encourage myself as well. I need to keep doing it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Liz, that is such now an important agenda. And I wonder if you had any thoughts on allyship, how one can best be an ally, a supporter, mentor, an encouragement to people from different backgrounds.
I definitely feel, if I look back in my career, and it's hopefully far from over, so I'm still in the middle of it, but there were incredible people throughout my life who did whether it's tap on the shoulder or took me aside and had a chat, or sent me an email about a possible job or whatever it is, and very, very light touch, but a lot of people who saw some potential or encouraged to take an opportunity or take a chance. And I think you look back and you think, without those various people, I would never be sitting here now. I'd never have done what I did. I'd never have achieved it. I don't think any of us do this alone. So I think all of us, again, have this amazing opportunity, but also responsibility to, wherever we see, potential, wherever we're missing it, wherever we think you take sport, there must be so much potential and talent out there that we miss, that we don't see it because people don't have an opportunity to join a sports club or don't have a teacher who will support them, or so you sort of feel this wonderful obligation that we should all feel, I think, in that we're all going to be better off when we get great people doing great things. So ideally, can we all do our bit to where we see potential, or where we can help, or where we can offer a word of advice or support, or all of us, I'm sure, have had, whether mentors in name and title or just in behavior, that advise and support. And whichever level you're at, I still constantly will go to other people to get advice and guidance. And I think, the wonderful thing is to then feel that you can now offer it to other people as well. And I think, it just makes sense, isn't it? I think you look at the world right now, there's brilliant things happening every day all over the place. There's also huge challenges happening every day all over the place. And if all of us can do what we can to try and, bring help where it's needed, bring support where it's missing, do our bit, then you think we've all got a chance.
And those challenges, Catherine, what do you see those being for leaders in the future, over the next 10 years or so?
Well, where to start, Dave? There's it's never dull, is it? I've decided that life is definitely never dull. There's so many areas. Right now, obviously, global politics seems to be going at quite a pace everywhere, and we don't know how much that will mean there's a new world order, or if it will destabilize things. And I think everyone's got one eye on a very unpredictable future for many people. We've got climate change as obviously when that will feel like there's a real urgency to make change, and whether it's sustainability or climate, there's definitely things happening around our planet that I think need action to make sure that we're going to change for the better. The rise of artificial intelligence is, I think, still this incredible mixed bag of more and more people seeing the exciting opportunity that it brings, but also people feeling very nervous about what the risks that we haven't seen or haven't spotted. And I think an understanding of that is going to be crucial, because it's not going to go away. With that, with data and increasing access to data, cybersecurity is always going to be a threat to anyone in any position. I think we've got polarized politics, whether that's at the very, very top international level or whether that's even on community level. I think that the challenge to debate and discussion can be really difficult, and it can be hard for people to have, those really open-minded, interesting, challenging discussions, because it can polarize very quickly, and then sides are taken, and I think that's a loss to healthy debate. I think with that comes this doubt about how you find, it's mad that we even talk about, where do we find truth now? What do you trust? Where do you trust for a source of knowledge and truth? And I think a period of time ago, no one would ask, what is truth? Whereas I think now we do ask it, where your source is and what your sources, what can you rely on? So yeah, I mean, in our country, the cost of living, I mean, it's not just our country, is it? Where wealth is, where opportunity sits. I mean, gosh, you name it. I think leaders have got a lot ahead of them, but in a way, that isn't that great. The fact we could hopefully influence, help, support, bring good is the chance for all of us.
Yeah, and I think that never has the world needed good leadership as much as it does now. And I was just wondering, if to sort of round things off, if you had any thoughts or tips you would offer somebody stepping into a leadership role.
This is going to sound a mix of some overly simplistic and a bit cheesy, which I'm always very wary of. I think if you are a fundamentally good person, which hopefully most leaders are, then just do good. I think you will be challenged and you'll be questioned, and you will never be able to please everyone, as much as you might try to. But if you are generally doing what you believe is right, based on all the information you have, all the advice you can get, if you are in a very difficult position, but you make the right decision and you can stand by it, because as much as it is the right thing to do, then you take on criticism, you take on challenge, but in your heart you will be unswayed from this, but this is the right thing, and you just have to do the right thing.
Brilliant. And that again is Windsor, isn't it? The excellent leaders leading for good.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things I led on at the beginning, before I really learned my craft, is instinct. And I think instinct does go a long way. I think, if you get that feeling of something doesn't feel quite right, or something feels a bit uncomfortable, you've got to listen to it. You've got to listen to it when something sits uncomfortably, or you have a bit of doubt. Even if you don't know why, I think you have to follow that doubt and just sort of see. And also, when, like, the flip side is when you finally have to make a hard decision, which I've done numerous times in this career, in this role. If ultimately you think, but this is the right thing to do, and I've had two chief execs in this role, and they are just so solid with integrity. They're just a joy to spend time with. They have such strong integrity. They're not, and I've watched it many times over, they don't like making hard decisions, but they're not afraid to, because they really believe, one, it's the role of being a leader, but two, it's the role of that responsibility is you make the hard decision, not because it pleases people, not because it's the easier option, but because ultimately it's the right thing to do. And you have to go on that instinctive belief of what's right. And like I said, when it's doesn't feel right, then listen to that as well. Listen to the doubts.
Beautiful. Dame Katherine Grainger, a massive thank you to you for your time today with us. And we do look forward to welcoming you back to Windsor again at some point in the near future.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.